You're listening to The Briefing, first broadcast on the 20th of August 2026 on Monocle Radio. Hello there and a very warm welcome to The Briefing. We're coming to you live from Studio 4 here in our Zurich headquarters with me, Emma Nelson. Welcome. Coming up on today's programme, just when he needs it the least, Ukraine's president faces calls to hold an election. We'll ask if this is a good time for the country to put its leader to the test. Also ahead on today's programme,
old industrial cities are the places where culture is the most important place for a city to move on.
But can design push development in places lost to post-industrial times? We'll hear a case study from the French city of arms and coal, Saint-Étienne. Plus...
Hello, Emma. I'm Fernando Augusto Pacheco, and for today's Global Countdown, we're heading to where you are in Switzerland.
I absolutely cannot wait, Faye. Thank you so much for bringing us that. We'll hear a little bit more from Faye a little bit later on the programme. That's all coming up right here on The Briefing with me, Emma Nelson. We begin today's programme in Ukraine, where it is forbidden to hold elections when the country is under martial law. But having been subject to a full-scale invasion by Russia for 4.5 years now, in Kyiv, normal life is getting in the way, especially in politics. The country's President Volodymyr Zelensky is under pressure to go to the polls. The ousted Defence Minister Mikhailo Fedorov gave an impassioned speech yesterday calling for wartime elections. Well, to tell us more, I'm joined now from Kyiv by the Ukrainian Member of Parliament and leader of the Liberal pro-European party Holos, or Voice Party, Kira Rudik. A very good afternoon to you, Kira. Thank you for joining us.
Hello, and thank you so much for having me.
Now, just for full disclosure here, Holos would, do we imagine, be fielding a candidate were you to go to an election to be held?
Of course, when and if we all survive until this point. This night, there was a massive Russian attack, killing at least 15 people in Kyiv. This is why I think it is absolutely irresponsible to be talking about the elections, while we know for sure we are not able to ensure the security and defense of our people, even on everyday basis. And when we are talking about the elections and the overall process, I just cannot imagine how we can concentrate our limited resources on that.
So would you actually be fielding candidates given what you've just said?
I do not believe that we will have the elections before the end of the martial law. And after the martial law is lifted and Ukraine is conducting the elections, we, of course, will participate.
Tell us a little bit about how we've got here, though, because for the last couple of years, we have heard disquiet from Kyiv, that domestically, Volodymyr Zelensky does not enjoy the popularity that he does internationally. We have turmoil in the defence ministry. The former defence minister, as I said, delivered an angry speech 2 days ago, Mikhailo Fedorov, saying that we need elections. Just explain to us whether we do actually genuinely need elections, regardless as to whether we are in the middle of a war or not.
There is no political party in Ukrainian parliament that would be calling for elections right now. And I would like to remind everyone that ex-minister Fedorov was working alongside President Zelensky for 7 years as first deputy prime minister for 6 years and then minister of defense. Moreover, he didn't call for elections when he was dismissed. He was only calling for elections when he learned that he would not be reinstated as a minister of defense. And as for a person who was a part of President Zelensky's system and one of his closer allies, I just think it raises so many questions about him building his own political career right now. At the beginning of full-scale invasion, we as political parties in Ukrainian parliament made an agreement that we will put our political aspirations and ambitions aside and put them below of the bigger goals. That is to win the war, to preserve our nation, and to support our people. And calling for elections right now is basically doing the opposite, putting your own ambitions above what the country needs for its survival. That's why I strongly disagree with Minister Fedorov. I respect him, but I think right now he's playing to his political ambitions and not what country needs and not what people need right now.
How how does the country manage itself? Because in any country, if you have had a leader in power for 6 years, and if you have been at a state of war for 4.5 years, difficult and bad decisions and unpopular decisions are going to be made by anyone who is in charge. Is there some way to ensure that the democratic process and that the country is governed internally properly? Is there any way to do that without actually having to go to elections? Because if you say it is impossible to go to elections, effectively you're arguing that there will be no elections or no democratic challenge until Russia stops its invasion.
So first and foremost, there are many issues with President Zelensky and his surrounding. That's true. And I have been very vocal about it, about the corruption cases and appointment mistakes, etc. However, the democratic process is not included only of the elections. It consists of many different parts, that is including free media that we still have, that includes the ability for people to go on the streets that we have observed. It includes institutions that are working independently. This is what we see by our anti-corruption organs attacking people and taking into custody people that are very close to President Zelensky. And another side of this is that Minister Fedorov was only calling for presidential elections. However, Ukraine is still a parliamentary presidential republic where the majority of the decisions are made by Ukrainian parliament. And as of right now, again, we do not see any way of how, even if we really desperately wanted it, how would we conduct it? And let me just name you the issues that we are facing with it. The first is security issue. Obviously, we cannot ensure the security of people who are in Ukraine and will be participating in elections. Second, what do we do with the military, who should have an ability not only to vote, but also to run? How do you do that when they're actively serving and should be allowed to participate in country's political process? We have millions of people outside the country that need to be allowed to, again, participate in the process, and we cannot ensure their return because of the security situation. We know that Putin said that at least 20 million of Ukrainians are living in Russia. This is a lie, but this is what Putin will be doing, trying to decrease the legitimacy of any sort of elections. Then there is a question of how do you preserve the results of the elections given the situation that we have on the ground. And there are so many questions without the answers that again distract us from very important thing that we should be doing right now, is preparing for the very hard winter. This should be priority number one. And I'm sorry, but these discussions about the elections that are coming here and there are just sound like distractions from the really critical thing that is facing us. No matter if we, no matter what we do, the winter will come. So I'm calling for everyone yet again to concentrate on ramping up international support, working with sanctions and supporting our army, because if we are successful with that and bring peace closer, then we will have the elections that some people desire so much, and then we will be able to get back to the democratic processes as soon as possible.
Kira Rudik joining us on the line from Kyiv. Thank you so much. Kira is a Ukrainian member of parliament and leader of the liberal pro-European party Holos. Listening to that was Monocle's contributing editor and host of the Foreign Desk, Andrew Muller. Good afternoon, Andrew.
Good afternoon, Emma.
So the big question that seems to be raised here by what Kira is saying is it is incredibly difficult to maintain a functioning democracy when you're at war.
It's incredibly difficult, and for all of the reasons that Kira just outlined there, it is completely impossible. And it may seem counterintuitive coming from opposition MPs, but I've spoken to other opposition MPs in Ukraine about the same thing, and they've all said more or less the same thing, although possibly to add to that, one opposition MP I spoke to from a different party, not Holos that is, did say when we were talking off the record, he said there is another reason why opposition parties don't want a presidential election, which is that we'd lose. He did go on to say, obviously, that President Zelensky's popularity in Ukraine is not what it was, and as he put it, nobody thinks he walks on water anymore. But he said every internal polling I've been able to look at suggests that if an election was to be held and President Zelensky was to run again, he would be pretty much unbeatable.
There is, unbeatable, yes, but as we have seen in the last few weeks, months, indeed years, allegations of misbehaviour by his close allies, cronyism, mismanagement, painting a picture of quite an unstable domestic position inside Ukraine. You've been inside Ukraine in the last few months. How unstable is it politically?
It's unstable in a good way, if that makes sense. For a country under martial law and for a country which cannot have elections, it still has a fairly vibrant, indeed downright rowdy civil society and sense of democratic participation. I've travelled in countries which are under martial law as people usually understand the term, and that usually means that absolutely no dissent is tolerated or uttered. Whereas, as Kira was pointing out, and as you have just said, there are independent anti-corruption bodies at work in Ukraine which are bringing down people very close to the president, which does not happen in anywhere you could really think of as any kind of tyranny. And we have seen more than once protests in Kyiv against decisions by President Zelensky, to which he has usually reacted by backing down. So there is definitely a democratic spirit still very much at large in Ukraine. It cannot be expressed through the conventional means of elections at the moment for obvious reasons. But, I am reminded of yet another opposition MP I spoke to shortly after the full-scale invasion began, who said that, because I did say that particular MP had been very critical of President Zelensky, and they replied, and as soon as this is all over, I will go right back to being critical of President Zelensky, but right now he's the president and we're at war.
Andrew Muller, contributing editor and host of Monocle's Foreign Desk, thank you so much for joining me on The Briefing. The time here in Zurich is a little gone at 1:10. It's 13:12 here in London. 13:12 here in Zurich, 12:12 back in London, where we can now hear from Thomas Waterhouse, who can bring us a day's news headlines. Thomas.
Thanks very much, Emma. President Trump has threatened tremendous economic consequences for any country supporting Iran. The statement comes one day after the UAE cut all trade and financial ties with Tehran. South Korea's Incheon airport has installed a transparent fence around a check-in area after viral footage showed passengers rushing counters and jumping queues. The move follows several crowd surges in July that reportedly injured staff. And shares in Unitree, the world's biggest humanoid robot maker, surged more than 600% on its Chinese stock market debut. The company's robots have gained global attention for performing martial arts and dancing with pop stars. Those are the day's headlines. Back to you, Emma, in Zurich.
Thank you very much indeed. Lots of dancing here. Now to France. The country has plenty of museums dedicated to design, but for the newly opened Galerie Nationale du Design, it is something new. Based in Saint-Étienne, it is a city designated a UNESCO City of Design. And to tell us more about why this is so special, we're joined on the line now from Milan by Monocle's Europe editor-at-large, Ed Stocker. Good afternoon to you, Ed.
A very good afternoon, Emma.
Now, you have been down to Saint-Étienne, haven't you? You've been to the Galerie Nationale du Design. Just explain to us why this is so special when it comes to a public gallery space for design-related work.
I have indeed. I was there a few weeks ago, just before everyone went off on holiday, like they are here in Milan. There's no one in the city. I was basically in Saint-Étienne, as you mentioned, to see this gallery. And it's special because it's the very first in France, the very first design gallery. Now, the difference between a gallery and a museum is the fact that basically museums have, big permanent collections, and a big amount of their space is dedicated to that permanent collection. A gallery doesn't have its own permanent collection, so it has a kind of flexibility. It borrows from a load of collections, and in this case, Saint-Étienne is borrowing from places all around the country, from Paris to Bordeaux, and then through that it will put on a series of exhibitions that will change perhaps once a year. I spoke to Aurélie Volz, she's the director of the National Design Gallery. And I asked her, really, why was Saint-Étienne, of all places, the right place for France's first National Design Gallery?
I think that Saint-Étienne is the right place to talk about design, because here was opened one of the first school of drawing in 1804. We also have a very important museum called Musée d'Art et d'Industrie, Art and Industry Museum, where we talking about the first industries of Saint-Étienne, not just talking about the ribbons and the weapons and the cycles. So this is a real territory for industry with a real history of how art and industry were together since a long, long time. I mean, it's really the story of this city. That's why I think that Saint-Étienne can really represent design today.
I mean, you mentioned arms, you mentioned ribbons. Those were two industries that were important in Saint-Étienne. Obviously, it is a post-industrial city. It's had its problems. Do you think design can be a vehicle for, I guess, development as well, given, there is this savoir-faire, there is this know-how. There are people who know how to make things with their hands. They are creative people that may have been in different industries that, that can maybe be redirected towards design and be this real vehicle for the city moving forward.
Yeah, I think Saint-Étienne was really the city for innovation since a long time. You're right, it's the vehicle for do things differently, I would say. You know that old industrial cities are the places where culture is the most important commodity vehicle for a city to move on, I would say. This is the case, for example, in the north of France. This is the same. There's a lot of poor cities that were industrial, and now this is where culture is the most important place with a lot of museums. And this is where I think culture, design, contemporary art, modern art, this is the case also of the Museum of Modern Art in Saint-Étienne, are really some important tools, I would say, for the city, for the region, and all inhabitants here to start again.
Well, that was the head of the new Galerie Nationale of Design. Ed, you were listening to that quick interview with the brilliant new leader of it. Just to explain to us a tiny bit about how cities like, well, let's talk Milan, where you are now. It's one of those places where in the late 19th and 20th century, it was the absolute king, the leader when it came to industrial and manufacture. Just go and see Lancia, go and see Alfa Romeo, go and see Pirelli. But it has obviously had to reconfigure itself, and it has embraced design in a big way. Where can we draw comparisons between those two places?
I mean, they've got very different histories. I guess, Milan has long been a huge producer of design. But I think, in terms of industry, there are some comparisons. I think, what's interesting about Saint-Étienne, Aurélie Volz mentioned the fact that it was an arms producer. It was a huge arms producer. And this actual National Gallery is within a former production site, a former factory that produced arms as part of the Cité du Design. It also produced ribbons. She mentioned ribbons for chocolate boxes. So these sort of odd industrial things that actually made it a powerhouse. It also was a big mining center for coal mining. And like many cities, with deindustrialization, it has suffered. And it still, in parts, is suffering. There's a new mayor, socialist mayor, who's recently celebrated 100 days in office. And he's looking to sort of revive the city, bring some life back to it. And they really do think design can be a vehicle for this, like they were saying in the interview. And, it's super interesting to see how that will progress. It has this know-how because, it had a very early design school. Super interesting. They were actually designing for the arms industry that sort of mutated into the Beaux-Arts, the fine arts school. So it has people who know how to make with their hands. It has people who know how to design. And so can they kind of bring this together to attract people to Saint Etienne, to come and see it for its design, and also encourage a whole load of designers to be there. One of the interesting things about being in a post-industrial city, being in what you might call a second-tier city, is the fact that it's the cost of living is much lower. It's easier for designers to rent space, to live in the city. And so it's really fascinating to see in coming years how the National Design Gallery will fare, and also how this bigger project, this Cité du Design, will work. They want to bring a hotel there. They want to bring more restaurants. They want people to come and visit this whole ecosystem of design in central France, Emma.
Now, you mean not just going off to Saint Etienne to see the new gallery, but you've also been, on a different note, but also related when it comes to your travels and your reporting, you've been in New York. What took you there?
I have. I've gone from a buzzing city where everyone's hustling. I've come back to Milan where literally all the shops are shut and everyone's down at the beach. So like the tale of two very different cities in August. I was doing a load of different projects there, reporting for the magazine. I was down in one of my favorite neighborhoods called Red Hook in Brooklyn, looking at designers there who are based in that sort of place that almost feels like it's not in the city. I was wandering around. Listeners may or may not know that I was based there for 6 years for Monocle, so it was great to be back. I was also down at the beach, but working, sadly. I was at a new project called the Rockaway Ocean Club that has basically restored this beautiful 1930s building and is turning it into this ocean club that is opening in phases, one part right now, and another part next year. And been speaking to a load of other people, from a pizza restaurant to an architecture firm who does a lot of cultural institutions. So plenty of content, Emma, coming up on Monocle Radio and also within the pages of the magazine.
Glad to hear it. Monocle's Europe Editor-at-Large, Ed Stocker, thank you for joining me on the line from Milan. You're listening to The Briefing. At 13:21 here in Zurich, but we head to London now to hear from our Monocle editor, Josh Fennett. He's going to talk about the latest September edition of Monocle magazine, finally out today with a special focus on education. Good afternoon, Josh. Have you got that back-to-school feeling?
I really do have that back-to-school feeling. Unlike our colleague in Milan, Ed, who's surrounded by empty streets, I'm not sure London really went on holiday. I know this is something you've discussed with our editorial director, Tyler Brulé, on Sunday and throughout the week as well, but the different holiday patterns haven't quite hit Midori House yet. But Emma, I've got a quick question for you. How are you enjoying your secondment in Zurich? You must be...
It's terrible.
It's a hardship posting, isn't it?
It's a terrible... I mean, if the lake notwithstanding, the sun notwithstanding, the food notwithstanding, the mountains notwithstanding, the team notwithstanding, I mean, it would be all right if all of that were fixed, frankly. It's a good place. As we can all see that when we do change location for a little bit, it refreshes the mind and makes us all sit up a little bit more strongly. But what is amazing is that we have a copy of the new Monocle magazine literally in my hand. I had to steal it from the cafe this afternoon. So if you've come into Monocle to buy a magazine, you can't have one because I've got it and it's my fault. So I'll be discreetly replacing it back on the stands in a little while. But I like the idea of the sort of education and back to school thing. What was it that drove the decision from what pieces you put in?
Well, I think it's always interesting. I mean, Monocle covers a lot of B2B stories. We want to know what's going on in the fashion, in the design, in the architecture industries. But when it comes to something like education, it can feel a little bit crunchy, can't it? It can feel a little bit sit up straight, do your times tables. And really, we wanted to move the idea of education into our world, to talk about lifelong learning, to engage with some of the conversations that are going on in the world about retraining. Not because we think AI is going to take everyone's job suddenly, and we know between us that it obviously won't take lots and lots of jobs, but it's about this idea of being open to learning and perhaps asking a few interesting people along the way, be they CEOs, architects, secretary generals even, what they learned along the way. And there is this little moment for nostalgia about their own schooling. But I think, some of the most interesting lessons in there are kind of life lessons, if that makes sense. So it's not just crunchy education. We're not working with someone that's trying to foist an MBA on you. We're talking about what it's like to live in the world and what it's like to gather knowledge, to gather wisdom, to gather experience. So a couple of short ways in which that's rendered. We do a thing about masters and apprentices and about passing on skills, something that's so crucial even in the UK with the new Prime Minister's agenda to try and make sure that we have probably fewer overqualified media graduates and a few more people that might be able to fix the toilet if it breaks.
You're not one of them, are you?
No, I'm deeply unqualified for the job I hold, in fact.
Excellent. I'm so glad to hear it. Interestingly, though, you do mention the fact that Singapore is the world's cleverest city. That always absolutely flies when it comes to education. But you're quite right. These whole sections on apprenticeship. So, when you mentioned that Andy Burnham was the new British Prime Minister wants to start apprenticeships, sort of eyes rolled in Germany and Switzerland, where they've been sort of just part of the educational juice for decades.
Well, we've got to put Andy Burnham on a plane, unpopular as that may be with the left. We've got to get him out to see the world and to see what makes a success of an education system. Now, the Singapore story is interesting because Singapore probably has a reputation for putting a lot of pressure on children, cramming academic results only. But the sliver of change and the interesting thing is that Singapore does very well academically, but it's investing in art and design and architecture and the creative industries because it sees that is where human capital should be invested in the future. So you've got this funny, interesting thing. If the computer can do all the sums, of course you need basic literacy. But maybe you could devote your time to doing something interesting and making something with your hands. And as you say, in the German-speaking world, which you know so well, and the language that you know very well as well, it's inherent that people would know how to do things with their hands. But somewhere in the UK, we've got lost along the way. So yeah, we'll book Burnham a trip. Maybe he can join you in studio, and Switzerland and the German-speaking world can teach him a few things about using our hands in apprenticeships too.
Excellent, Josh. How are your hands, and how's your German?
Well, for someone with a vaguely German-sounding surname, my German is atrocious, and my hands they're smoother than some people's. But I do a little bit of DIY work around the house. But I wouldn't be saying that I've mastered any practical skills.
Brilliant. As Andrew says, Andrew Tuck, our editor-in-chief, says every day is a school day. But just tell us briefly. There's a little bit of interesting point on what's happening in Lisbon as well. There is a new Lisbon survey tucked into all this, which a country which knows how to make things and how to preserve its own identity when it comes to creativity. Yeah,
you've hit the nail on the head. So we've got an amazing exclusive story about the Gulbenkian Foundation, which Monocle patrons and subscribers and readers can see with us when we host our Quality of Life conference there in the first week of September. Get tickets if you haven't already. But it's an amazing private collection in a very beautiful concrete building surrounded by gorgeous gardens that's been remade for today. And I think, the Lisbon story chimes with the education story because we hosted our first conference there 10 years ago and the country was it was on the up. Entrepreneurs were moving there. There were sweetheart deals for investment. But just 10 years before that, it was an Iberian outlier, a debtor nation, and people were leaving. And we've seen, as we've covered over the nearly 20 years of Monocle, different cycles of different change with places, pulling up their bootstraps and doing amazing things. But Lisbon has a few lessons for us all in reinvention, how to turn around a city, how to turn around a business, and how to be a great place to live as well. So I think it summed up the lesson we were trying to tell. I know you're going to try and get rid of me, Emma, but can I just share my favourite thing from the issue with you quickly?
I would never try and get rid of you.
Well, it's a busy show. You've got a lot to do. But we asked 25 interesting people, architects, designers, heads of businesses, for the one lesson that they've learned that they cherish most. And I just wanted to share a nice one with you from Gildo Zegna, the elder statesman of the Zegna fashion empire in Italy. His bit of advice that he wanted to share with us, which I think is really good and chimes with Monocle as well, but it's do the right thing, not the convenient thing. Isn't that a good lesson?
Perfect. I have to do the right thing, though, now, Josh, and get rid of you. Josh Fennett, our editor, thank you so much for joining us on the line from Studio One in London. And the new edition, the September edition of Monocle magazine, is out today. You're listening to The Briefing with me, Emma Nelson. Well, that sound means only one thing. It's global countdown time. And for the first time, Fernando Augusto-Pacheco, we are doing this remotely and it feels a bit strange.
It is strange. I wish you were here in studio. To be fair, I wish I was there in Zurich. I'm a big fan of Zurich, as you know, Emma.
And we're doing Swiss music today. So I suddenly realised that I have not been listening closely enough to what's being played in shops. Because actually our guide to Swiss music is now coming from London to a presenter who's in Switzerland. This makes total sense.
Yes, we're looking at the Swiss charts charts today. And you did say Swiss music's not quite Swiss music, but one thing I'll tell you, the Swiss charts, they're so international. Of course, it makes sense for a country like Switzerland where, there's 4 official languages. And I love that mix. But I wish there would be some Swiss artists cracking in the top 10. I mean, they had amazing people, DJ Bobo, Yellow. Bring them back. Or maybe find some new pop stars as well.
Absolutely. Well, I shall go and find some pop stars for you this afternoon. I'm not quite sure where to look, but I'll. And if you're a pop star and you're in the cafe, pop your head around the corner, and we'll say hello. Right. Let's look at the top 5 of what's happening in Switzerland. As you say, it's an international mixed bag, quite dancey, I would say. Would you pop this on a playlist when you were sort of, bouncing neatly through the streets of London on your way home to Soho?
We're going to start in such a good way, Emma. Number 5, it is for the dance floor. But to be fair, you can't really go wrong when you sample one of the most famous tracks in the world. So basically we have French DJs, Ugel and Solto, and they're doing kind of a rework of the classic song by Sister Nancy, Jamaican Ban Ban. Let's have a listen, let's enjoy, and let's sway our hips. Ban Ban. I mean, what a track.
We all went a bit bananas here, and frankly, it's a good thing that we can't see this. We had one lovely colleague from upstairs actually dance through the room carrying a parcel.
I mean, it's
clearly
delicious.
It has that sort of addictive thing. It's interesting to think that when I listened to that, I was trying to remember what the original sounded like. And these reworkings and these remixings, I was like, was there anything massively original in that? Or is that just a big love letter to an old house tune?
It's just a love letter, and I would recommend our listeners to actually go back to the original, which is a classic. And one shocking thing I discovered today, I'm doing research for this track, that Sister Nancy, for over 30 years, she didn't receive any royalties for that song. Thankfully, that changed because it's being sampled so many times. So don't worry, Ugel and Soto, I'm sure they're paying her royalties this time, but what a shame for Sister Nancy.
If not, I'm sure you'll go and have a word. Let's have a look at the next track. Something that our producer Laura Kramer said she'd heard 1 million times in the gym. And then other colleagues have said, actually, this is going bananas online. Talk us through this.
It is. This is the classic example of a song going viral on TikTok. And it's also the band's very first song. How lucky they are. And is a music style that we don't see that much in the charts today, which is rock music. They are a trio of Israeli Americans. And it's very kind of alternative rock for the charts. Let's have a listen to Temper City with Self-Aware. Very indie rock from the early 2010s, I would say. But, people are loving it. It is doing very, very well on TikTok. And as I said, it's the band's very first single.
Well, it's one of those funny situations, isn't it? Well, it's not just Temper City's first single, but it is known online merely for the chorus. And so we have something made incredibly famous by something that lasts about 25 seconds.
Exactly. Well, we'll be talking a little bit more about this new, how we're consuming music later on this charts. I mean, I have some shocking revelations. But anyway, shall we move on to number 3?
My gosh, how much do we need to brace ourselves for shocking revelations? Some of us are standing. Do we need a chair?
Brace yourselves. Maybe you might need a chair. Not for number 3, no. Number 3 is a party song. Did very well.
No chair needed, okay.
No chair needed. It's a celebration song. It did very well for the French football team in the World Cup, of course. It's by Congolese French musician Mauvais Joe with Pile. Les billets d'argent pile, Michael Jackson a pile, elle m'a dit l'entendre il est là, Michael Jackson a pile, I was singing along, Emma, because...
We all noticed. It was lovely. Actually, arguably slightly more melodic, but I'm not going to say that on the radio. Whoops, I just did. Right, so tell us about Mauvais Joe and what's clearly a bit of a party drinky song.
party drink song and is about celebration, because I believe Pillay, in the way he's referring the track, is all about money, like stacked wealth. He's doing very well in life, and he wants to share with others and party. It's the summer. No wonder the French football team liked the song as well. It's there's something quite infectious about it. And it's been in the charts, Emma, I believe for 8 to 9 months. I mean, it's a song that has a kind of staying power for sure.
No one's going home yet. Right, okay, so that was, so number 5 was a no chair song. Number 4 was a maybe chair song. Number 3, certainly no chairs. How many chairs have we got for track 2?
Okay, track 2, you might need a chair for this one.
Okay, I need a chair.
I will introduce you to the song neatly and then I'll tell you why I'm having some reservations here. Ugel is back, this time with Utranate, the great American DJ singer there, and Imael Anjo with Moving to the Sun. Listen, the song is quite serviceable, no comment on that. But the thing that I was a bit sad is that Imael Anjo, she is the one who kind of made the song, the first version of it, but it is AI generated. And then what happened is the following. Then Ugel, he listened to the track and then he reworked, so it's not all AI. And he invited Utranate, which is, a legendary name of dance music. Big fan here. She had big singles like Free, but it's kind of sad that it was AI generated at first. And that's what the music industry is having to deal with it today, Emma, because I know Spotify and the streamers, they're being they're trying to be very strict, but some songs, they are on the charts and they're fully AI. We have Tyga as well, which is, very, very famous musician, and Pitchfork gave a score 0 for his latest album because he admitted, say, you know what, AI helped me make most of it. We're in this kind of very interesting period in music. Number 2, not so sure if I'm a big fan.
What a shocker. We were quite enjoying it until that night.
Yes, me too.
Now we have closed our ears firmly, Faye. Number 1, nothing artificially intelligent about Shakira and her hips, which never lie.
And they never lie. And I love Shakira. And you know what? At first, when Die Die came on the charts, I was like, oh, it's not quite Waka Waka. It's still not Waka Waka, but
it's never going to be Waka Waka.
It's never going to be Waka Waka. But can I be honest? It's a close second there. What a fantastic track with Burna Boy. Die Die by Shakira. Let's have a listen.
Feel it, got everything you needed. Now bring it like you need it. Just like you need it.
I think the Swiss like a hip-shaking song. That's my conclusion.
We have one Swiss person around the table, so I'm going to ask her, Jamie, do the Swiss like to shake the hips?
I'm not sure.
Excellent. Well, that's a conclusive evidence there. No one's sure whether the Swiss like. We'll try this later off air, but thank you very much indeed for that, Jamie. Right, so Shakira, obviously, World Cup long gone, but she's still sticking around in grand style.
That's the surprising thing about the song. It's been about a month since the World Cup finished, and this is still the number one, not number one only in Switzerland, but globally. So it does have a remaining power. I wonder if we're going to keep listening to Die Die when autumn comes.
Fernando Augusto Pacheco, thank you from London for the Swiss Global Countdown. And that's all the time we have for today's edition of The Briefing. The warmest of thanks to all my guests and to the producer Laura Kramer, our studio manager in London, Elliot Greenfield here in Zurich. It was Desiree Bandley. The Briefing's back tomorrow at the same time, but for now from me, Emma Nelson, goodbye. Thanks for listening.